Hello, and welcome everyone to the virtual Marlene Meyerson JCC Manhattan. My name is Adina Kirstein, and I am the Director of Special Events. I hope we find each of you safe and healthy at home. I'm thrilled to welcome you to tonight's event, Person, Place, Thing with Randy Cohen and his guest, Mo Rocca. Tonight helps kick off the JCC's Lambert Center for Arts and Ideas exciting fall season of virtual programs, including guests Jeffrey Toobin on October 21st, and on November 4th, the incredible Jamie Floyd, who will guide us through the headlines the day after the presidential election. As part of our effort to remain connected during this unprecedented time, we're inviting the community to these programs free of charge. We know so many are in challenging circumstances, but if tonight brings you laughter and connectivity, which I think it will, and you're able to make a gift of any size, you will help in our ability to remain a vibrant community supporting one another. And we've made it very simple. Please text the word community to 56512. Tonight, we welcome Emmy winner Mo Rocca to our virtual stage. Mo is a correspondent for CBS Sunday Morning and a frequent panelist on NPR's hit weekly quiz show, Wait, Wait, Don't Tell Me. His love for obituaries inspired his #1 hit podcast and book of the same name, Mobituaries, an irreverent but deeply researched appreciation of people from the past. Our host tonight is Randy Cohen, who wrote The Ethicist, a weekly column for the New York Times Magazine for 12 years. Prior to that, he wrote humor pieces for The New Yorker, Harper's, The Atlantic, and Young Love Comics. His first television work was writing for Late Night with David Letterman, for which he won 3 Emmy Awards. His 4th Emmy was for his work on Michael Moore's TV Nation. There will be time for questions from the audience tonight, so please feel free to submit yours at any point during the conversation by clicking the Q&A button on the bottom of your screen. And now, please join me in welcoming Randy Cohen and Mo Rocca.
Now I can see us. Thank you, Adina. I should just say a tiny bit about the format we'll use tonight. I think people are particularly interesting when they don't speak directly about themselves, but about something they care about. And so this evening, Mo will talk about one person, one place, and one thing that are meaningful to him, right? That's how we planned it, Mo, right?
Yes, that's right. That's right. We planned it a while back.
Oh, we should say that. Well, you explain.
Well, this was planned pre-pandemic, like so much else in our lives. And I told you what that person, place, or thing would be that I care a lot about. I've forgotten 2 of those things. So I just want everyone to know that if I seem a little surprised by the topics, it's because the pandemic is eating my brain. It kind of is. So, but I think it might also provide spontaneity.
Yes, and panic on my part. No panic on my part. This will be the first time that the guest doesn't remember what the place and thing are. So
I really don't remember. Randy, but, can I also just interrupt to say that?
Yeah.
I'm sorry that I didn't shave for you, but I'm meeting Leslie Uggams tomorrow morning, and I wanted to be clean shaven for her. So I'm waiting to shave until early tomorrow morning.
Wow. Just that you have my life is affected by Leslie Uggams already. I feel so much more glamorous, Mo. Thank you for that. I did shave because my life's completely empty and I'm not meeting anyone.
Or maybe you just met Leslie Uggams before. So anyway.
Not likely. So Mo, yes. Who is your person?
My person is a woman who has since passed on. I only learned recently. A wonderful woman that I met in Indianapolis in 1998 named Wanda Wheeler. And she was a longtime docent, a volunteer at the Benjamin Harrison home on Delaware Avenue in the old North Side section of Indianapolis. Benjamin Harrison, our 23rd president.
Did she get some kind of costume? Did she dress appropriate to the period, turn of the century, or no? Did she wear civilian clothes?
She did indeed wear a full-length, I guess, Victorian 1880s period gown. And she had been volunteering there for 22 years at that point, already 22 years, and she would go on to volunteer for many more years before she moved to Arizona. I didn't know that I would meet her. I just knew that I was going to the Benjamin Harrison House in Indianapolis. I'd never been to Indianapolis. The only thing I knew about Indianapolis was the opening credits of One Day at a Time, which always made it kind of look grimy and dingy, but it's actually a very, very pretty city. And I went because I'm a big presidential history buff, and I liked the houses of the presidents that you can't remember were actually president. The guys between Lincoln and Teddy Roosevelt with a lot of facial hair. A lot of them are from the Midwest. And I like visiting those homes because they're off the beaten path. I grew up in the Washington, D.C. area, going to Monticello, to Mount Vernon. I'd been to Hyde Park. But I found the sort of forgotten presidents and their sites more interesting, in part because the people who work there have to be really committed to get you interested.
So was she there because she's a Benjamin Harrison buff, or because that was the only president they had in Indianapolis?
I think the latter. And but but she had become just like an amazing docent. She'd become so fanatical about Benjamin Harrison that she could convert, I think, pretty much anyone who went to that house. And many of the people, I think, going to that house, frankly, were there to use the bathroom. I mean, they were in the area. But I watched her. When I showed up, I met her. I thought I wanted to write an article about some of these homes, an article that I never ended up selling. But when I was there, after I interviewed her, a group of second graders showed up. And so I tagged along with them on a tour. And her devotion to Benjamin Harrison, was off the charts. And she had a kind of cadence. I can't remember where she was from originally. I think she might have been from the South, or maybe just from Southern Indiana. But as we went through the house, and the kids were rapt, I mean, they were completely gripped by her. She would say, "Well, look at that pie safe. Have you ever seen a pie safe like that? No, you haven't." I mean, she didn't wait for them to answer. And I remember that she moved on. "Well, look at that Hoosier kitchen cabinet. Have you ever seen a Hoosier kitchen cabinet like that? No, you haven't."
So her approach was to intimidate the children.
Kind of, but it worked. I mean, it taught me an early lesson in commitment. I mean, I never thought I'd care that much about a Regina phone, which is a precursor to a phonograph. But when she said, "Well, look at that Regina phone. Have you ever seen a Regina phone like that? No, you haven't." I had to agree.
Well, and it sounds kind of filthy too, doesn't it?
It did. It did sound like something medical.
So did she receive some kind of historical training to do this? Did she receive some acting training?
I'm pretty sure she didn't. And I don't know how fact-checked she was. It was a volunteer position, which I thought was remarkable that she was volunteering for 22 years there. And I really found it inspiring. I didn't want to disagree with her when she said that he began the National Park Service and that he was the great conservationist president. I think he might have signed the grant for Yosemite or Yellowstone, but I think we all know Teddy Roosevelt was like sort of the great conservationist president. But I wasn't going to disagree with her. And, you know, before I could disagree with her, we moved on to Helen Keller. There was a great moment in the tour where she said to the kids, Helen Keller, I guess, had come to the home or had met Benjamin Harrison at some point, and there was a photo of the two of them. And she asked the kids, "Do you know who Helen Keller was?" Before they could say whether they did or not. She said, "Well, Helen couldn't see and she couldn't hear. She couldn't really speak. And her parents just at one point threw up their hands and said, 'We don't know what to do with Helen.' And so they called up a woman named Annie Sullivan. And at this point, I was and I'd forgotten all about Anne Bancroft and about Patty Duke, right? Because her version was just so much better."
My sister played Helen Keller in the Green Hill Summer Stock production of A Miracle Worker when we were children.
And did you run
That's all.
lines with her?
No. What would the
Okay.
lines be? Wah, wah. She didn't have a
Right.
line.
The great.
I think she had no lines except wah. Wah was her line. Benjamin Harrison, 1889 to 1893, right?
Yeah.
His major accomplishments.
He is the meat in the Grover Cleveland sandwich, because you know how Grover Cleveland throws everything off because he's the non-consecutive president. Benjamin
Right.
Harrison's the guy in between. He was, I think he imposed really high tariffs. He thought he was helping American business. That didn't work. I don't think China paid for the tariffs. I think we ended up paying for them. He was also known for having a handshake, quote, like a wilted petunia. And I can't think of anything worse that could be said about someone. Well, there are worse things, but that's pretty bad.
Also, he was the only president to be the grandson of another president.
That's right.
William Henry Harrison.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
I don't know if that's an accomplishment. That's more like, I don't know, the luck of the draw. Do you remember a play called Lettuce and Lovitch, where it's a tour guide in a stately home of England? Yeah. I can't remember who wrote Lettuce and Lovitch. Someone will know and will email us. But she makes up everything. I like an inaccurate tour guide.
I do too. It's so much more interesting. And I'm telling you, Wanda was so committed by the end. I mean, we wanted to sandblast Mount Rushmore. I did, and just replace it with Benjamin Harrison. And I have a love and a real appreciation, certainly, for docents, especially volunteer ones, because this is a piece of history. I mean, the federal government's not funding this. It's not under the auspices of the National Archives. You know, without the Wandas of the world, I don't know that these sites would really exist, or they certainly wouldn't be giving tours like they do.
Do you make a distinction between a gifted amateur like Wanda and a trained professional like, I think the term of art is the people of the past at Williamsburg?
The interpreters, right? Or the people. Sure, because I'm pretty sure that Wanda hadn't gone through a program. She hadn't been trained. And, you know, just like you just learn to love your home team, I guess you learn to love your home president.
Where did you grow up?
With enough distance.
Yeah, well, we know who the hometown president is here, and I think it's going to take more distance than is imaginable on any map. But where did you grow up? Who is your hometown president?
Well, I grew up in Bethesda, Maryland. I grew up right outside of Washington, D.C., and I've always imagined that for kids growing up in L.A., there's sort of a parallel. Like in Washington, the president is generally sort of like the above the title film star. And in the 70s, and in the 1970s, when I was really little, you know, Washington was especially unglamorous. It wasn't really the subject of I mean, post-Watergate especially, didn't really interest Hollywood much at all. So you sort of felt like you were in a very unsexy place. And, you know, the gates around the White House at least felt like something kind of glamorous.
Yeah, you had all the presidents. I grew up in Reading, Pennsylvania, and we had only two celebrities. John Philip Sousa died there, and much was made of that because, you know, you work with what you have, like Wanda.
Right.
And Wallace Stevens actually lived there. And the house he lived in, when he lived in Reading, had become where my mother's dentist was.
But wait, I missed the second name though. Who?
Wallace Stevens.
Oh my goodness. Okay. Wow.
Yeah. And so every time my mother went to the dentist, there was a plaque for Wallace Stevens on the side of her dentist's office. You work with the celebrities you have.
And is Reading near Lancaster at all?
Yes.
Okay, well, that's where James Buchanan is from.
Is there a historic house?
Oh, yeah. It's called Wheatland. And there I met a woman, oh God, what is her name? She's so great. Well, she was in her 90s a few years ago, who gives tours there. Wheatland has an outhouse built for 5. And James Buchanan was our only bachelor president. So, I mean, I don't know what was going on.
How many of them have you been to, Mo, the houses of the presidents?
Out of the 44 different, because of the Grover Cleveland thing, right? The 44 different occupants of the White House, I've probably been to homes for about 30 of them.
Wow.
And yeah, yeah. I was just at Rutherford B. Hayes's house in Fremont, Ohio, for a story that I'm working on about the election of 1876. Sometimes our most forgotten presidents have the best houses. It's an amazing house.
What makes it an amazing house?
It's got this porch that's about 80 feet long and 14 feet deep. I mean, it is a porch made for a pandemic. I mean, I was just on that porch, just gallivanting back and forth, forgetting that there was a pandemic. I could not have been happier than I was on that porch a couple weeks ago.
Well, New York City has two great historic houses. One presidential house, it has both run by the Federal Park Service. Teddy Roosevelt's house on what, 18th Street?
That's on 20th Street. And
20th Street.
It is a reproduction. It's a rebuilt. It was right.
Is that so?
Yeah, unfortunately. Well, it's one of those things, like there's always like these old ladies associations that raise the money, but after it was torn down 2 years later, the Ladies Association said, you know, that shouldn't have happened. And so they rebuilt it. But what was the second one you were going to mention?
The second one's not presidential, but it is wonderful, and it is run by the Park Service. And I'm thinking of the Grange, of Alexander Hamilton's house,
right,
which is not a reproduction, but which was moved twice.
Yes, isn't that crazy? It was a rectory at one point, or attached to one, I think. And it was the only, when I went to visit there about 15 years ago, it was the only National Historic Site in the country, the only site with that designation, NHS, where the ranger carried a gun.
Oh. Is that because of the duel, do you think? Or just the changing?
Because it was like angry. Yeah, exactly. Or, in case descendants of Byrne Hamilton show up. I also love the Morris Jamal Mansion.
The Morris Jamal Mansion. That is, I think, the tour that everyone who has kids, when you grow up in New York City, they take you to the Morris Jamal Mansion, which is wonderful.
Right. It's really great.
Yeah. We just went to my mother's dentist, and it always got on his nerves when we showed up. So we should take a moment and do plays. This is when we do the show live, this always makes me sad that this is when we'd have a band and we take a moment and the band would play. But we can just sashay right into your place if you'd like.
Yes.
Okay, the pressure's on. Where is your place?
I am now suddenly remembering, I think I told you that my place was Bodega Bay.
You did. This was back, we planned this back in February. So I'm very impressed. Yes. So why Bodega Bay?
I have a real fondness for the movie The Birds, the Hitchcock movie The Birds, which takes place in Bodega Bay. And going over to my grandmother's apartment on Sundays for Italian Sunday dinner, which is really more like a lunch. Growing up, we would watch sort of Metro Media Channel 5. They'd have old movies, and The Birds was on a lot. I certainly remember it, and I love that diner scene. It's a scene where they're all hunkered in the diner as all hell's breaking loose after the birthday party where the birds attack the kids, and Melanie Daniels, Tippi Hedren's character, runs in there and says, these birds are attacking. And Mrs. Bundy, the ornithologist, it's an avocation, so she's not a licensed or degreed ornithologist, but it was an old British actress with a beret smoking, and she's saying things like, birds have been around for 2.5 billion years, and like how birds are peaceful creatures. And she's doubting Melanie Daniels, and there's a woman who looks a little bit like Rachel Dratch, with children going like, "You're scaring the children." And then there's a guy at the bar who's going like, "Birds are filthy, dirty creatures. It's the end." And then there's another guy saying, "It's the end of the world." And it's one of those scenes as a child that's terrifying, but then as you watch it as an adult, you realize that Hitchcock had such a great sense of humor. And this is just such a fun, great, character-driven scene. and I always just wanted to go to Bodega Bay because I kind of fell in love with the movie and that scene and wanted to see that diner. And I've been 3 different times, and each when I've gone to San Francisco, I've driven up north. It's about an hour and a half. It's got great seafood. It's really a beautiful town. I've gone, I feel bad saying this, with 3 different boyfriends. At different points in my life.
Jake package number 4, right? The weekend in Bodega Bay. You've got this all down to this sort of routine.
My final boyfriend, who may be watching right now, he should know that this was. The promotion is over. But it's the diner is not there, sadly. The schoolhouse where Suzanne Plachette is teaching,
right,
before
Annie Hayworth.
Annie Hayworth, thank you, before she gets her eyes plucked out. That's still there, and it kind of met my expectations for just being a really lovely town. And the bonus was no one was killed by birds when I went.
I look for that in a sort of romantic weekend.
Well, absolutely, because so much of the time these things don't meet your expectations; they fall short. But this exceeded it. I mean, maybe if I'd seen one person get attacked by a bird, it would have been. It would have been
better. Is there? Have they capitalized on the movie in any way? Is there a birds gift shop? Is there a birds tour?
Well, it's so funny. Do I have it around here? Maybe I threw it in the laundry. I have 3 different The Birds T-shirts from the 3 different visits.
Pretty cool. Pretty cool. Yeah. Do you think there's something slightly perverse that the movie is? I mean, the movie's filled with death, horrible, bloody, quite frightening death. And that was your idea of a romantic getaway?
Oh boy, I hadn't thought of it. But I guess I found the danger kind of thrilling. There's nothing like nestling, cuddling with your other half and, putting the dining room table up against the fireplace so nothing can come in. Just to be sure. It makes you cuddle tighter.
Yeah, it's nice. It's not, or sometimes there are things that it's a little risky if that Bodega Bay means a lot to you and you bring someone there. What if they didn't enjoy Bodega Bay?
Ooh, I would think they might be those weird vertigo people, which is not my thing at all.
No.
That's a fair question. I think it's a fair litmus test to say, do you kind of get the joke, or do you enjoy the movie or that scene in particular? And can you appreciate the humor in it? I don't know. I think it's important to have a sense of humor. And it is a really kind of great, terrifying, and yet funny scene.
It is a great scene, but we should also say, if there's anyone watching who hasn't seen the movie, you should tell them how that scene kind of ends. What happens after all this funny chat?
Well, and the waitress, Sam, like when she's coming in and out, there's all these great character actors, and Mrs. Bundy has mocked Melanie Daniels over and over again about confusing ravens, I think, with crows, and then one of the birds swoops down on a guy who's getting his car filled with gasoline outside. The guy had been lighting a cigarette, then self-immolates basically when the lit cigarette hits the ground, and then Melanie Daniels goes out. She barricades herself inside of a phone booth. It really makes you miss phone booths when you see this scene, by the way, because where will you hide, when the next attack happens? And then eventually she comes back into the diner. She'd gone out there to try to help the man who had gotten nailed by the bird. She comes back in and everyone's huddled in the back. The mother hysterically accuses her of bringing the evil birds to Bodega Bay. She slaps her across the face. She needs to. It's totally justified. But what's really significant is Mrs. Bundy has her back turned to camera. She's cowering. and she's embarrassed, but she was proven wrong. And I came away, and my grandmother used to yell at the TV when the movie was on. I remember her yelling at Mrs. Bundy, saying, you know, when Mrs. Bundy was doubting Melanie Daniels, saying, "You don't know, you don't know." My grandmother would yell at her. And I think there was a lesson there that Mrs. Bundy was sort of book smart, but Melanie Daniels had empirical evidence. I mean, she had experience. And so I think maybe it made me distrustful of so-called experts.
Or at least ornithologists, maybe. I don't know.
Pretend ornithologists.
But I mean, there's that also a wonderful moment when the guy is gassing up his car and he's smoking the cigarette. He lights a cigarette and he's holding the match. What the people in the diner see that he doesn't see.
Right. He doesn't see that there's a pool of gasoline, right, pouring out from underneath the car. Something that I guess the pump hasn't been replaced properly. And he's lighting his cigarette, and they're maniacally banging on the inside of the glass for him to notice the pool of gasoline. But he's so distracted by their banging and their gesticulation that he accidentally burns his own hand, right, with the match that he's used to light his cigarette. And so then he drops the match, and that's
yeah. And I thought that was a great dark lesson, that all your efforts to help will only make things worse.
Right. Absolutely. Absolutely. Look, I mean, she should have stayed in San Francisco. She should have never gone chasing Rod Taylor up the coast.
Well, I thought there was a certain tension between her, right, and Rod Taylor's mother throughout the movie too. That's also really perverse.
Jessica Tandy, right.
Who's jealous of.
Yeah. Well, there's all this weird sort of, I guess, Freudian stuff. It feels very 1960s, like these long and meandering conversations about the tension between the girlfriend and the mother, who met like 24 hours before. I mean, yeah.
But already, Jessica Tandy's really, really jealous because Tippi Hedren's going to take Rod Taylor away from her.
Yeah. You know, I met Tippi Hedren. It was really, I met her years ago. A friend of mine, as a birthday present, was given a group trip to Shambhala, which is her ranch, her safari ranch, I guess, in Southern California. So I went there, and she was lovely. Tippi Hedren was there. And then I got an autograph from her. I was probably 25 years old. And when she signed it, she made those little bird doodles, you know, just a little line like that. And she handed it back to me, and she said, "Now you can say you've met Tippi Hedren and the birds."
Ooh.
Yeah. And while she was signing it, I had my friend take a picture. And in the picture is her signing my booklet or my program, and me going like this.
Nice.
As if we're being attacked.
I understood. That gesture conveyed it all. You didn't.
Well, no, I just didn't know for people who only are listening.
Oh.
Yeah.
Right. Just see the site of a movie, or let me put it this way: when they film a movie someplace I know, it always glamorizes the location. Everyone will stop and watch. Do you find that to be true, that if they're shooting on your block, I mean, you don't have to go to Bodega Bay, that just the presence of a film crew glamorizes any place it shows up?
Oh my goodness. Yeah. I mean, as you know, growing up in DC in the 70s, again, after All the President's Men, it seemed like nothing ever filmed in Washington, DC. It was a very big deal when Being There, the movie Being There, I think in 1979,
Peter Sellers
shot some scenes there. It was a very big deal. And then later, I liked that Goldie Hawn movie Protocol. That had some of that was shot there. But it was oftentimes a disappointment when things that took place in Washington weren't shot there. Well, or anywhere for that matter. I used to think growing up that sitcoms that were shot in the cities in which they took place. It was a real disappointment for me to find out that WKRP in Cincinnati wasn't taped entirely in Cincinnati. or that One Day at a Time wasn't taped entirely in Indianapolis. And then somebody once told me that Mary Tyler Moore never spent a single night in Minneapolis. And I don't know how this person would know this, but that she flew in early in the day to walk around that pond in Minneapolis. And I think their kids like that are following her, she's following them, but that she flew in the morning and then she flew out that night. She didn't even spend the night there. I don't know how somebody would know this, but somebody told me this with complete Wanda Wheeler-like confidence.
I'm a little disappointed in Mary now, and that's good. It's better that I've been idolizing her for years. And I don't know why.
It's kind of churlish. Like you'd think, like, I don't know, spend the night and like have brunch in St. Paul.
Have brunch in St. Paul. There's a statue of Mary Tyler Moore in Minneapolis.
Right.
The statue throwing the hat. Yeah.
And there's one of Henry Winkler in Milwaukee.
And there's one of Sylvester Stallone in Philadelphia. And thus, American historical life is thoroughly debated.
And there's one of Thomas Jefferson in Washington, D.C.
All right. Well, we're not going to get a better at than that. So let's take a moment and we'll be, right back, or we would be right back if we went anywhere. It was very impressive that you remembered your place after all this time. Let's see what you do with this. What is your thing?
I don't remember.
Okay.
Is it my father's trumpet?
No, your father has a trumpet?
Yeah.
Oh, no, it could be. I'll give you an option. I mean, I haven't prepared any great Mo's father's trumpet material, but it was a cat's sweatshirt.
Oh my gosh, do you want me to go get it?
Do I ever?
Okay, hold on. Okay, there's my hair look. Okay.
When we are preparing to do a show, I always do a little pre-interview with the guest and ask them what their person, place, and thing will be, mostly so I can prepare.
I hope we didn't lose any. Oh, we lost some participants. I don't like that. I guess the people maybe they're North by Northwest people. Okay, so this is my cat's sweatshirt. So this was a the eyes. Everybody remembers the eyes, right? Oh, hello. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Oh, sorry. Oh, yeah. So when I was 14, shortly after I turned 14, my parents and I took the Amtrak train from DC to New York to see the then pretty brand new musical Cats. And I'd become obsessed with it already, listening to the double LP Cast album over and over and over again. And my friend and yours, I'm pretty sure, Lisa Birnbach, told me, has this theory. She interviewed me about Cats when it was revived on Broadway. She had this really interesting theory that I buy into, that it's like a first love, depending on how old you are, and regardless even of quality sometimes, there's a musical that hits you at a certain point of life and you just become obsessed with it. Like, had I been a little bit younger, it might have been The Mystery of Edwin Drood, but it just Cats came right at the point where I was ready to fall in love with the musical completely. So I became obsessed with it, and I had to call Ticketron or Teletron or whatever it was, obviously pre-internet, over and over again to get tickets. And depending on the operator you got, there was always a different answer. They probably were just looking at paper charts or something. And so they found 3 seats in the back row of the Winter Garden Theater in February of 1983. And so I went up there with my parents. It was incredibly exciting. When Betty Buckley sang Cats, though, I remember my father, like, dads back then always had like janitor keys. Like, my father had like a huge wad of keys. I'm not sure. And it was pretty tight in the back row there. My father, while she was about to hit the big note, I think he was restless and he put his hand in his pocket and it jangled just as she sang "Touch Me." It still was magical, even if we were in the last row with the jangling keys in the last row where none of the cats would sit on your lap, because that was a big deal. Like if you were in the orchestra section, the cats would dance around you. I got this sweatshirt, and when I returned home at Pyle Junior High, I think I wore this probably for almost every day for a couple of months. The eyes in the back were a big deal. And then
much a big deal. And the eyes, supposedly, it was this British ad agency. Do you know about this?
No.
Oh, that was handling the graphics for all the promotion for the show, called the De Winters, and it was supposedly it was they who came up with the dancer and the iris, the logo that we all love.
It's a great logo. It's a great logo. I mean, now and forever, it's a great logo.
And supposedly, this guy named, wait, I want to get his name right, Anthony Pygeri, a hyphenated name, who worked at De Winters, he saw the audience milling around in the lobby with nothing to buy. And he claims to have conceived the idea of the show T-shirt.
Well, I hope he's been given credit for it and more. I mean, it's a great logo. And I loved this sweatshirt. It made me feel really cool. And many years later, I profiled Andrew Lloyd Webber for CBS Sunday Morning, and I had him autograph my sweatshirt from back then. Man. Yeah.
That's pretty fantastic. That could go, when you're ready to retire, it goes right to eBay, and that pays for your whole retirement.
My whole retirement. Yeah.
Yeah. Cats was, I don't know if people remember quite what a huge deal it was, that in 1997, it set the record. I wrote down some Cats facts for the most seen show of all time, the most seen musical of all time. 8 million people saw it, beating out. Do you know what had the record just before that?
Was it Fiddler?
Chorus Line.
No, Chorus Line, of course, Chorus Line.
Yeah. Now I assume it's The Lion King, right?
No, is it it's Phantom of the Opera now.
Oh,
it's
really?
Phantom of the Opera. Yeah.
Wow.
It's Phantom of the Opera.
And that Cats also didn't get particularly good reviews. And I think the first huge hit that seemed utterly unaffected by lukewarm reviews.
Yeah, I think even at the time, Frank Rich was pretty tough on it. And I think there was this pretty accurate sense that the age of the mega musical was upon us. And that these shows would now come that were sort of indestructible. It's funny because it really occurred to me when it was revived on Broadway, and it was kind of underwhelming to see that it was, for whatever reason, a moment in time where I think we all can look back on it and go, did that really happen? That was so strange that people were going nuts to go watch this sort of nonsensical plot about a bunch of cats, and one of whom was essentially the hooker cat, right? Who wanted to die to be brought up to something called the Heaviside Layer. It didn't really make much sense. There weren't great songs. It was a dance musical. So really, I'm surprised that I liked listening to it as much as I did, but to see it was magical. And that set was amazing. I think the guy's name was John Napier or something. I
don't have that. I don't know.
It was extraordinary. And I think the Winter Garden Theater, in the way that it extended beyond, I guess it seemed like they took the proscenium out. It was kind of like a thrust. And all that oversized trash that was sort of spilling out into the audience, it was totally exciting. And I also think that when they revived it in the wrong theater, in a much more, with the proscenium, they maybe didn't pay the rights to like the Brillo pad or whatever brand names they had back then. So it didn't have the same punch. But
those details add up to everything. It's totally everything. They may seem trivial, but they're not at all. Do you think you don't look back with any embarrassment at like the youthful affection? You know, there are books I enjoyed when I was very young that I would never enjoy. I wouldn't read now. I'm not exactly embarrassed by it, but sometimes our youthful affections can be a bit embarrassing.
This was at 14. And then after that, I went to an all-boys school. So I'm sure that I was a little reticent about mentioning it then, because it didn't seem like something to go on and on about. So I was probably a little bit embarrassed about it, but I played it constantly at home, and I drove one of my brothers and I feel terrible about it, actually. I mean, not terrible, but I drove him bananas because there was this long opening where they kept singing about the Jellicle cats. Jellicles can and Jellicles do, Jellicles. And he would be in the next room and the walls were pretty thin. And he'd be like, turn it down. And so I'd turn it down. But then it turned out that it was even more annoying because all he could hear was like it was even more irritating just hearing it at a lower volume.
Yeah, yeah.
So, but I still needed to hear it. So I put my ear up against the turntable, the speaker, just to listen to it over and over again. So it really was like a weird, like a crush, an infatuation.
Yeah, and there are things that that one ought to love at 14. You know, if you still loved it now, I would pity you. But if you didn't love it at 14, I would pity you. It's a worthy youthful infatuation. You know, one theory for how Cats came about was there was this whole generation, like Ethel Merman's generation, of Broadway greats. They were dying of old age, and they needed a big show that didn't rely on a famous star, or apparently a face.
Interesting. I believe that certainly makes sense. Yeah, that a lot of those shows, I mean, Phantom of the Opera, I mean, it started with a big star, right? Whose name I'm suddenly forgetting, Michael, Hello, Dolly, the movie.
Yeah.
Cornelius.
I'm forgetting it too often. Yeah. All right.
So, but anyway, it's gone on for 30 years without really any other big stars. Yeah.
Was it all out-of-towners who came to see Cats?
Yeah, I think what happens, I have a friend who's been in the musical Chicago, and I hope he can return to work soon, but there are these waves, right? Like maybe in the beginning, New Yorkers will go, and then it's domestic out-of-towners. And then at this point in Chicago, I think it's Japanese and Germans. I mean, it gets to Axis countries eventually. But and when I went to see Phantom of the Opera, I'd never seen it, weirdly enough. When I profiled Andrew Lloyd Webber, he gave me his producer's seats, which are generally unoccupied. And my mother and I went, and pretty much everyone was a tourist from Asia. And it was kind of interesting, like and I thought the musical, I wonder if they were very farsighted about it, because you don't really need to understand, you sort of get it all just by looking at it. Like it's like a silent movie. You know, you can figure out what's going.
Plays are not going to be going to Bangkok.
Right.
You know, that's a tough shift. Yeah. Do you know, my other Cats shirt fun fact is it was by far the best-selling T-shirt for a Broadway musical ever. It's I think just a brilliant logo. But there was only one shirt with a commercial logo on it in the 80s that outsold it. Do you want to guess?
Well, I mean, from a Broadway show?
No, not from a Broadway show, just with a commercial logo, another kind of entertainment experience, not a Broadway show.
Jaws?
Close. The Hard Rock Cafe was the only shirt in the 80s to outsell the one you have. And I thought, well, there it is. They're two American cultures right there. They're the people wearing.
That's amazing.
Yeah. What do you make of it?
What do I make of that? That really does show you how Cats represented a whole new class in stage entertainment, a whole new era, right? That it permeated the culture that much. it's a very big deal for live entertainment to do, right?
It is a
I mean,
big
The
deal.
Lion King is the same way. The numbers of people, I used to know the figure. I mean, it's pretty amazing the numbers of people who have actually gone to see The Lion King.
And I think what, like 90 countries or 90
Yeah,
continents or
yeah,
90 planets. I mean, it's everywhere. It's everywhere. People
right.
love it. Yes. It is, and maybe so you're drawing a line from Cats to The Lion King.
I think so. I mean, it's hard. I mean, I can't think of another production or a run of something. I mean, obviously there are shows that are so deeply ingrained in the culture, like Fiddler on the Roof is, right? It still gets sampled, by hip hop stars. So
I like to end every episode with a little grimace, and that's a perfect one, which won't show up in the radio. But will you take a few questions?
I'd
Um,
love questions. I adore
um,
questions.
um, oh, okay. Uh, Speak a little about the Henry Ford innovation. I love that show.
Oh, it's I love hosting it. It's a show that I host on Saturday mornings on CBS called the Henry Ford's Innovation Nation. It's centered. I do my part of the show from that wonderful museum in Dearborn, Michigan, and it's really a tribute to innovators today, but also the great history of innovation. And the thing that I love about it is are the stories of innovators who failed and failed and failed and failed and failed and failed and failed before they succeeded. And I that's the thing that one of the things I worry about with social media is when the word fail, like hashtag fail, is used as a cudgel. And I think, boy, you know, I mean, so many of the great things that we enjoy, so many of the great innovations only came about because people, maybe they didn't love their failures, but they built on them anyway. So but it's a wonderful show to host, and I like projects where I get to learn on the job, and that's one of them.
Yeah, I'm thinking there's a sort of parallel in architecture, that one of the things that makes the architect Louis Kahn, I think, so endearing to so many people is he built a whole lot of buildings that were, I think the technical term was crap. People hated them, but it was quite late in his life that he suddenly did these buildings that you would weep for how beautiful they are.
Right.
And that there's some late life success is incredibly appealing.
Well, late life and I tend to, even in the subjects, I think that's one of the reasons there are several reasons I like profiling older people. They're just more interesting, first of all. They generally are selling a little less hard. But I love talents who come into their own or are recognized later in life.
It's tricky though, because if you're, let's say you're a bad architect, it's not just a matter of taste. I mean, the buildings don't work. People hate being in them. They fall down. You don't get to build a lot of buildings. And so you're finished as an architect or you're finished as an inventor. So it takes more than just will to continue.
It certainly does. It also takes an ability. It takes perception and ability to listen, to adapt. Absolutely. I mean, it's hard for me to. Yes, I don't know where those people are that just keep failing and not learning from their failures. I mean, that must be awfully frustrating.
Another question. How did you find out about Garfield House? The Garfield House. How did you find out about Harrison's house?
I was watching. This is a bit of a. This is as best as I can remember. I was watching the Today Show, and it was during this period after the Clinton healthcare proposal that was run by Hillary Clinton had sort of blown up in her face. And after the midterms that year, I guess she was sort of shunted into a more traditional first lady role. So she began something called Save America's Treasures. And that morning, I was watching her give a tour of Thomas Edison's home in West Orange, New Jersey, giving a tour to Maria Shriver. And I remember thinking, she doesn't really want to be doing this or something, but whatever. And I don't know how this happened, but I somehow I looked and found that the house was near one of the sites nearby. It was the Grover Cleveland birthplace in West Caldwell, New Jersey. And I thought, who goes there? So I went to Port Authority and I bought a bus ticket there, and I met a woman there named Sharon Farrell, who I think is still the docent. And she was the caretaker and docent of the house. And in exchange, she lived on the third floor of Grover Cleveland's birthplace and had raised her family there, which I thought was like the sitcom that I would dream of starring in, and I was so taken with her story and her, that I then picked up a book of presidential homes, and I immediately went to the forgotten presidents. And I didn't know what I was doing with my career at that time, but I knew I had this itch that I wanted to scratch. I guess you call it a yen, right? And so I bought a one-way ticket to Indianapolis, and I mapped it out from there that I would hit a bunch of these sites.
Nice. Oh, two quick fact checks. Our sophisticated audience knows. No. They're giving us the answers. The original Phantom, Michael Crawford.
Michael Crawford. Right?
And Lettuce and Lovitch, written by Peter Schaffer.
Oh, Equus, right? Yeah.
Yes. When will the next Mobituary season begin? And who's in store?
Well, I can't say exactly who's in store. I try to keep that under wraps, although I'm always open to suggestions. We are starting production soon. They're wonderful to do, also very labor intensive, but I hope to roll them out early in 2021. But it's been a joy doing them.
Another book coming?
Sure. Look, people are dying all the time. Sorry, that's a really.
I didn't mean necessarily another Mobituary
book.
I think the question was just book in general. I mean, it might have meant, are you planning to read another book? Or write one, either way. What are you reading now, by the way?
I'm reading this new, this is for work, I'm reading this new biography of Eleanor Roosevelt. I'm reading Notes of a Native Son, James Baldwin, which I never read before. Wait, I have more there. Oh, I'm reading, somebody suggested something on Princess Margaret called 99, what is it called? 99 Views of Margaret.
Yeah. I was just reading about that.
Yeah. My friend Mark Ruther told me it's really great. Oh my goodness. So that's, it's called, 99 Glimpses of Margaret. Yeah, it's supposed to be great. So that's and I'm also reading a biography of Peggy Lee.
Nice.
Yeah. I wanted to go to North Dakota, but the COVID rate is really off the charts there. But I want to do a story. It's her centennial.
This two presidential homes recommended here in New York State. One is Sagamore Hill, Teddy Roosevelt.
I love that.
Out on Long Island. Have you been?
Yeah, I love it. Amazing living room.
And Hyde Park.
Yes, and I'll be going back up to Hyde Park pretty soon. I suggest if you're willing to go a little farther out, Lindenwold is up on Route 9. It's the home of our 8th president, Martin Van Buren, and it's named for the linden trees out front. It's this Italianate structure. It's the first house in the town to have plumbing. It has like this Chinese marble sink basin. He was pretty fussy, but it's really beautiful. It has the original wallpaper in the living room and the dining room.
Nice. I can tell you that at the Grange up on 145th Street, it's reproductions. It is not, it's fake wallpaper. I don't know if that discourages anyone from going. How often do you appear on Sunday Morning, and what's up next with that?
I have a feature, not this Sunday. I'm on about every other week. I have a feature on the statues debate, the debate over statues, kind of a cover story. I'm doing something on the election of 1876, which is going into edit now. I have I'm going to be doing this profile of Leslie Uggams, which I'm really looking forward to. Boy, I've got a whole bunch of stories. I'm doing something on the designer the artist and designer Alexander Gerard. I have a profile of Russ Tamblyn coming up. Yeah.
Oh, someone in Jessica Feinstein, in fact, not just someone, Jessica Feinstein really enjoyed your grandmother's ravioli. Do you want to tell a ravioli grandmother cooking story?
Well, I love doing it. I went around the country learning how to cook from grandmothers and grandfathers in their kitchens. It was a show that I created for the Cooking Channel, and it was an amazing experience. It was great. The people that I met, and you know, I find that interviewing people while they're actually doing something, something they love, especially, opens them up in a way that sitting across from them doesn't always. And I would hear, I learned much more about their lives than I learned about cooking, because you know the cooking only really sinks in right if you do it, and I was really in it for the stories, but I absolutely loved doing it. It was a great experience. 4 seasons.
Since you teased us by alluding to and giving us a glimpse of your father's trumpet, can you tell us briefly why your father's trumpet is hanging up behind you?
So my father, as a boy, had played the trumpet, and you know, he's like a lot of people. He stopped doing it. Life interfered. He, you know, went off to school, then off to the army, then got married, raised 3 kids, started a small business. And it was something he regretted. He always said, I wish I'd not stopped playing. And my mother on Christmas, for Christmas of 1975, she had gone down to a pawn shop with her own mother, who was visiting from Columbia. The two of them went downtown DC to a pawn shop, and she bought him this trumpet. And I remember when he opened it up for that Christmas, and he was so overjoyed. And he played religiously every weekday morning in the cellar. He'd go downstairs to the cellar and spend a half an hour working on scales and on his embouchure, on the way the lips fit around the mouthpiece of the instrument. And then at night, he would play an hour of Dixieland jazz, and I would roller skate around the cellar as he played. And I felt like I was at Innsbruck, like just sort of as, you know, but skating to When the Saints Go Marching In. And it really made a big impact on me. It certainly orally it did, like the metronome was like the sound bed of my youth. But you know, he didn't think that he was going to he was under no illusion. He didn't think he was going to be playing at the Blue Note, that he'd become a big star. He did it for the love of it. And he put so much love into it. And he would never miss his weekly jam sessions with his buddies, a band that they put together called the Metrotones, on every Monday night. And so it's very important to me, that trumpet and what it represents. So.
There used to be something called a hobby, and it was perfectly respectable, and everybody had hobbies, and it meant that your work might be central in your life, but it wasn't the only thing in your life, and it was completely honorable. You might belong to the photography club or the chess club, but that word at least seems to have gone out of common usage. Do people have hobbies?
I don't. You know, I've always been slightly embarrassed, even ashamed, that I don't have one. The excuse I tell myself is that people who work in creative fields, in media, you know, kind of our work is already kind of entertaining and diverting. But I could still use one. I know. I think it would be, maybe I just lack the time management, the discipline for it. But you're right. I don't hear a lot about it, about people having them. And for my father, I think it was essential when he walked down those steps, and I can still hear the sound in his slippers walking down and up the cellar steps, and the sound of him, sorry, with the clearing the spit valve in the trumpet over the sink. But it was going to a totally different place, and a place that he needed to go to. It was so important, that trumpet.
Yeah, and now it just seems all the more admirable that someone does something, and there's no money involved in any way. They're not trying to cultivate a career. They just like it, and if you do it with other people, it's all the more appealing.
Yeah, and listen, when he would get a gig, and they were sometimes at assisted living, sometimes at nursing homes where the people were really in bad shape. But I'm telling you, he was so excited and took it so seriously and was nervous. And if they got hired to play at a restaurant, at the Roma restaurant, Connecticut Avenue in DC, I mean, that was a very big deal. But they had jackets made up. They took it. It was everything. And somebody, my father died in 2004, but somebody, a trumpet player, Michael, what is Michael's last name? I'm forgetting, but great trumpet player that I did a show with, said to me, I said, what is it? What do you think it is? What's distinctive about trumpet players? And he said, trumpet players, when you play the wrong note on a saxophone or a clarinet, you can cover it up. It's pretty easy to cover it up. When you bust a note on a trumpet, everyone knows. And yet you have to go back the next night, probably, right? And try it again and play again. And that takes a certain kind of grit and I don't know, leap of faith, a personality. It's a big deal. Like that. It's bold. It's bold. And yeah. So my father had I guess a lot of guts to take it up late in life again.
It puts me in mind of your affection for inventors who fail and fail and fail and have a success late in life.
Yeah, people have all sorts of journeys. I mean, I feel that way about myself, and you need to be patient with yourself and just keep going.
Do you want to tell a quick wait, don't tell me story, or when you're going back on, or?
Well, I love doing the show. I mean, it's the only thing I've done that's both fun and easy. I find that the fun and easy usually don't go together. When people say, "Oh, just go out there and have fun," I always find that a little bit annoying, because something's fun when you work at it, I think, and you get good at it, and then you can sort of let go and just have fun. Wait, Don't Tell Me is different, because you have Peter Sagal and the great producers kind of laying all the groundwork, doing all the work for us. So the panelists just show up at the appointed time. We mouth off. We try to be as unedited as possible. And they kind of clean it up for us, and edit. So it's all upside. But it's and it's also great because we all come from very different worlds. Most of us, the panelists, it's not like what I imagine being on something like Saturday Night Live would be, where, I think it's probably brutally competitive. But it's nice mixing with some people who, Roy Blunt is a Southern writer. Roxanne is a columnist for Washington Post. Paula is a stand-up. My friend Adam Felber was a longtime writer for Bill Maher. So we all come from different places, and that makes it more interesting.
Nice. Well, I think our work here is done. Mo, thank you so much.
Well, Randy, it's been great being with you. And I can't wait to hear both.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'll keep you posted. Thank you so much.
Bye-bye. Thanks.